Get that cripple out of my store. I don't need your kind, bringing down the atmosphere for paying customers." The store manager snarled, pointing aggressively toward the exit. Michael Ramirez, a disabled Marine veteran who'd lost his leg in Fallujah, stood balanced on his prosthetic, his shopping basket still in hand. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't caused any disturbance, just quietly browsed like any other customer. "I'm sorry?" Michael asked, his voice steady despite the shock. "I'm just here to pick up some groceries." The manager stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "I don't care what you're here for. Veterans are always trouble, expecting handouts and special treatment. Out, now." 30 minutes later, as the store prepared for its afternoon rush, the glass doors swung open, and in walked not one, but 16 imposing figures, all wearing the unmistakable bearing of the United States Marine Corps. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Michael Ramirez was struggling to rebuild his life piece by piece after 8 years as a Marine, with 3 combat deployments and a Bronze Star for valor. Civilian life felt like navigating an alien landscape. The IED that took his right leg below the knee during his final deployment had ended his military career abruptly, forcing him into medical retirement and thrusting him back into a world that moved at a different rhythm than the structured military existence he'd known since he was 18. He'd settled in the small town of Riverbrook, drawn by its quiet streets and the nearby VA hospital that provided his ongoing physical therapy. 6 months into civilian life, he was still adjusting to the strange emptiness that came with no longer having a clear mission, no squad depending on him, no structured chain of command. The transition felt more challenging than any combat patrol he'd ever led. Michael lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a converted old mill building downtown. The historic structure had been recently renovated to be fully accessible, which had been a major selling point. He kept his space meticulously organized, a habit carried over from military life, clothes precisely folded, bed made with hospital corners each morning, everything in its designated place. This order gave him a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. At 32, Michael didn't match the stereotypical image many civilians held of a disabled veteran. He wasn't bitter or broken. He maintained his military fitness as best he could, adapting his workout routine to accommodate his prosthetic leg. He kept his dark hair in a short fade, not quite as severe as his military cut, but close enough to feel familiar. His brown eyes remained alert and observant, constantly scanning his surroundings, another habit that civilian life hadn't erased. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Michael had walked the 6 blocks from his apartment to Hartwell's Market, a mid-sized grocery store that had been a Riverbrook institution for decades. The original owner, Old Man Hartwell, had always given veterans a respectful nod and a 10% discount without making a show of it. But Hartwell had sold the business 2 months ago to a corporate chain that kept the name but changed nearly everything else. The new manager, Victor Pearson, had been brought in from the company's flagship store in the city. He was a tall, lean man with perpetually pursed lips and a designer suit that seemed at odds with the small-town grocery business. Pearson had immediately implemented what he called aesthetic upgrades to attract a more discerning clientele. This included soft lighting, artisanal food displays, and piped-in classical music. But his most significant change had been his approach to staff and customers, coolly professional to those he deemed valuable, dismissively rude to those he didn't. Michael had noticed the shift in atmosphere during his weekly shopping trips, but had managed to avoid direct interaction with Pearson until today. He moved through the store methodically, his prosthetic causing the slight uneven gait that he'd worked hard with physical therapists to minimize. His shopping list was simple: Protein, vegetables, coffee, and a few staples. He wasn't there to browse, he was there with a mission to accomplish. He was examining a display of locally grown apples when he first noticed Pearson watching him. From near the customer service desk, the manager's gaze wasn't casual, it was assessing, disapproving. Michael recognized that look. He'd seen it before from people who viewed his disability as something that made them uncomfortable, something that didn't fit their idea of what their world should contain. Michael ignored the look and continued shopping. He selected his apples, added them to his basket, and moved toward the dairy section. As he reached for a carton of eggs, he heard the sharp click of dress shoes approaching on the polished concrete floor. "Excuse me, sir." Pearson's voice held no warmth, just barely concealed impatience. "Is there something specific you're looking for today?" Michael turned slowly, maintaining his balance carefully, as he always did when shifting position with his prosthetic. "Just picking up my weekly groceries," he replied evenly. "Almost done." Pearson's eyes flicked down to Michael's prosthetic leg, visible below his shorts, then back up to his face. A tight smile appeared that didn't reach his eyes. "I see. Well, we're actually preparing for a private shopping event for our premium members this afternoon. We'll be closing to regular customers in about 15 minutes. Michael checked his watch. It was 2:15 p.m. The store's posted hours showed they closed at 9 p.m. "I'll be checked out well before then," he assured Pearson, turning back to his shopping. He could feel Pearson hovering, not leaving, the man's presence creating an uncomfortable pressure. Michael had faced down insurgents in Fallujah with less anxiety than he felt from this unexpected confrontation over something as simple as buying groceries. He moved toward the bread aisle, hoping Pearson would find something else to do. Instead, the manager followed, maintaining a distance of about 6 feet, watching Michael's every move. Other customers began to notice, some shooting curious glances their way. Michael felt his neck growing hot with embarrassment. All he wanted was to complete his shopping in peace. As he reached for a loaf of bread, his basket bumped a display of artisanal crackers, causing one box to fall. Before it hit the floor, Michael caught it with the reflexes that had once made him an exceptional Marine. As he bent to place it back on the shelf, Pearson stepped forward. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I think that's enough," Pearson said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "You're disrupting our displays and making other customers uncomfortable." Michael straightened, looking around in confusion. The nearest customers were an elderly couple who appeared more concerned about Pearson's behavior than anything Michael had. "Done. I just bumped a box," Michael said quietly. "No harm done." Pearson's expression hardened. "Listen, I've been watching you limping around, knocking things over. This isn't the VA. We've rebranded to attract a certain clientele, and frankly, you're not it." The words hit Michael like physical blows. He'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatant, so unapologetic. For a moment, he couldn't respond, his mind struggling to process the casual cruelty. "I fought for this country," Michael finally said, his voice still controlled, but with an edge of steel beneath it. "I have as much right to shop here as anyone else." Pearson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Get that cripple out of my store. I don't need your kind, bringing down the atmosphere for paying customers." The store manager snarled, pointing aggressively toward the exit. "I'm sorry," Michael asked, his voice steady despite the shock. "I'm just here to pick up some groceries." The manager stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "I don't care what you're here for. Veterans are always trouble, expecting handouts and special treatment. Out, now." Several emotions warred within Michael. Anger, humiliation, disbelief. He could feel his training kicking in, the discipline that had been drilled into him as a Marine. De-escalate, assess, respond appropriately. Don't give in to the first impulse. He knew, create a scene. He could raise his voice, demand to speak to corporate headquarters, film the encounter on his phone. He could easily physically intimidate Pearson if he chose. Prosthetic leg or not, Michael remained stronger than the average civilian. But what would that accomplish? A viral video? 15 minutes of outrage on social media? More importantly, what would it say about him? About the core values he still lived by? "I see," Michael said after a moment, his voice calm and controlled. He carefully placed his shopping basket on a nearby shelf, making sure nothing would spill or fall. "I'll take my business elsewhere." He turned and walked toward the exit, his gait measured and deliberate, refusing to show any difficulty with his prosthetic, despite the emotional turmoil roiling inside him. He could feel Pearson's smug satisfaction radiating behind him, could sense the confused and uncomfortable stares of other shoppers who had witnessed parts of the exchange but done nothing. As he reached the automatic doors, he heard Pearson call after him, "And don't come back." "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Michael didn't look back. He stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight, the doors hissing closed behind him, cutting off the artificially cool air of the store. For a moment, he stood on the sidewalk, gathering himself, fighting the wave of humiliation that threatened to overwhelm him. He'd faced mortar attacks, sniper fire, and IEDs with less emotional impact than this casual dismissal from a grocery store. This reminder that some people saw him only as his disability, as somehow less than a full person deserving of basic dignity. The injustice of it burned in his chest, a familiar anger that he'd worked hard with his VA counselor to manage constructively. Michael began walking, not toward his apartment, but toward a small park 2 blocks away. He needed space, needed to process what had just happened before deciding what to do next. The comfortable weight of his phone in his pocket presented an option. He could call the corporate office, could report Pearson's behavior, could potentially even pursue legal action under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But as he settled onto a bench overlooking a small duck pond, he found himself opening a different app. The Marine Veterans Support Network was a private group chat for his former unit, the men and women he'd served with, trained with, fought alongside. Some were still active duty, others had transitioned to civilian life. All remained connected by the unbreakable bonds forged in service and combat. Michael rarely posted. He was more likely to respond with encouragement to others' challenges or celebrate their successes. But today his fingers moved almost without conscious thought. Hartwell's Market, Riverbrook. Manager Victor Pearson just kicked me out for being a disabled vet, called me a cripple, and said veterans expect handouts. Just FYI if you're in the area. Ramirez. He hit send, then immediately regretted it. The last thing he wanted was to seem like he was complaining or couldn't handle his own problems. He quickly typed a follow-up, "Not looking for anything, just letting you know. I'm fine, plenty of other places to shop." Michael put his phone away and spent a few more minutes watching the ducks, using the mindfulness techniques his therapist had taught him. Center, breathe, observe without judgment. Find perspective. By the time he stood to walk home, he had mostly regained his equilibrium. This was just one ignorant person, not worth dwelling on. He'd find another grocery store, report the incident through proper channels, and move forward. That's what Marines did, adapt and overcome. What Michael didn't know was that his messages had set off an immediate flurry of activity in the group chat. Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado, who had served as his platoon sergeant and was now stationed at the Marine Corps base just 30 miles from Riverbrook, had seen his message immediately. Her response was swift and decisive. Unacceptable. Location. Confirmed. Available Marines check-in. Operation Respect commencing at 1500. Within minutes, 15 current and former Marines had confirmed their availability and proximity. None asked for clarification or questioned the necessity of their response. One of their own had been disrespected, discriminated against for his service and sacrifice. The response was automatic, a reflex born of years of training and the core belief that Marines take care of their own. Michael was halfway back to his apartment when his phone began buzzing with incoming messages. He pulled it out, expecting perhaps one or two sympathetic responses from his former unit members. Instead, he found the chat moving so quickly he could barely keep up, with Marines confirming their ETA at Hartwell's Market, coordinating transportation, discussing strategy. His immediate impulse was to shut it down. He typed quickly, "Guys, seriously, don't make a big deal of this, it's not worth it." Staff Sergeant Delgado's response was immediate. "With respect, Ramirez, this isn't just about you. This is about all of us, about what's acceptable treatment for any veteran. See you at 1500. That's an order." Michael couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Technically, Delgado couldn't give him orders anymore. He was a civilian now. But once a Marine, always a Marine, and the chain of command died hard. He considered going back to try to prevent whatever his unit had planned, but a part of him, a part he wasn't entirely proud of but couldn't deny, wanted to see what would happen. Instead, he continued home, changed into fresh clothes and sat on his couch, both dreading and anticipating whatever Operation Respect might entail. He knew his Marines well enough to know they wouldn't do anything illegal or truly disruptive. But he also knew they wouldn't let this stand without some form of response. At precisely 2:55 p.m., as Victor Pearson was supervising the setup for an afternoon wine and cheese tasting event for select customers, the first Marine entered Hartwell's Market. Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado walked in alone, dressed not in uniform, but in impeccable business casual attire, pressed slacks, a crisp button-down shirt, and low heels that clicked authoritatively on the floor. She looked like any other professional customer except for her bearing, straight-backed, purposeful, alert. She walked directly to the customer service desk where Pearson was instructing an employee on the proper arrangement of imported cheeses. "Mr. Pearson," she asked, her voice polite, but carrying the unmistakable tone of someone used to being answered immediately. Pearson turned, his expression automatically shifting to what he considered his valued customer smile. "Yes, how can I help you?" "My name is Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado, United States Marine Corps. I understand you had an interaction with one of my Marines earlier today, a disabled combat veteran named Michael Ramirez." Pearson's smile faltered. "I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to discuss interactions with other customers. If your friend has a complaint, he's welcome to contact our corporate office." Delgado's expression didn't change. "I'm not here to file a complaint, Mr. Pearson. I'm here to educate you on a matter of respect and equal treatment." As she spoke, the automatic doors at the entrance opened again, and again, and again. One by one, Marines entered the store, not in a group, not making a scene, but steadily, inexorably filling the space with their presence. Some were in civilian clothes, others in their service uniforms. They moved with quiet efficiency, positioning themselves strategically throughout the store, near exits at the ends of aisles, beside the customer service desk. Within 3 minutes, 16 Marines had entered the store and taken up positions. They didn't block customers, they didn't touch merchandise, they didn't speak loudly or make demands. They simply stood, straight-backed and attentive, their eyes fixed on Victor Pearson, creating a silent wall of watchful presence. Pearson looked around, his face draining of color as he realized what was happening. "What is this? You can't just come in here and intimidate me. I'll call the police." "No one is intimidating you, Mr. Pearson," Delgado replied calmly. "No laws are being broken. We're simply here as customers, deciding whether this establishment deserves our business." Pearson glanced around nervously, suddenly aware of the quiet transformation taking place in his store. What had moments ago been a normal afternoon was now something entirely different. The Marines weren't blocking aisles or preventing customers from shopping, but their presence was undeniable. A silent, disciplined formation that drew the attention of every person in the store. "This is ridiculous," Pearson sputtered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just show up and what exactly are you doing? Protesting? I'll have security remove all of you." A tall Marine with a sergeant's insignia on his uniform stepped forward from his position near the deli counter. "We're exercising our rights as citizens to patronize, or not patronize, a business based on its practices, sir. There's no law against standing quietly in a public establishment." His voice was calm and professional, but carried the natural authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Delgado maintained her position directly in front of Pearson. "Mr. Pearson, I'd like to discuss what happened with Corporal Ramirez earlier today. According to him, you denied service based on his status as a disabled veteran. You used derogatory language, referring to him as a cripple, and suggested that veterans are troublemakers who expect handouts. Is this accurate?" Pearson's eyes darted around, noting that several customers had stopped shopping to watch the confrontation. Some had phones out, potentially recording. The wine and cheese event guests were arriving, looking confused at the unusual scene. "That's not. I never said." Pearson lowered his voice, leaning toward Delgado. "Look, there was a misunderstanding. The man was disturbing displays, making other customers uncomfortable. It had nothing to do with him being a veteran." "Corporal Ramirez lost his leg serving this country in Fallujah," Delgado replied, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "He earned a Bronze Star for valor after pulling 3 wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire. He completed his physical therapy at the VA just 4 months ago and is working hard to reintegrate into civilian life. And you found his presence disturbing." One of the Marines near the entrance, a compact woman with her hair pulled back in a regulation bun, stepped slightly forward. "Mr. Pearson, I served with Corporal Ramirez during his second deployment. When our convoy was ambushed, he positioned himself between incoming fire and our wounded, providing cover until medevac arrived. He remained calm under the most extreme pressure. I find it difficult to believe he was creating any legitimate disturbance in your grocery store." Pearson's face flushed. "I don't care what he did in the military. This is my store, and I decide who shops here. Now all of you need to leave before I call the police." "By all means," Delgado said, pulling out her phone. "I'm sure the local news would be interested in covering the arrest of 16 Marines who were peacefully standing in a grocery store after the manager discriminated against a disabled combat veteran. I should mention that 3 of us are lawyers in the JAG Corps, and discrimination against veterans with service-connected disabilities is illegal under federal law." As if on cue, several more Marines touched their phones, and the subtle clicks of recording devices being activated seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. A middle-aged woman who had been shopping stopped her cart next to Delgado. "Excuse me, but did I hear correctly? This man," she pointed at Pearson, "kicked out a disabled veteran just for shopping here?" Delgado nodded once, her expression remaining professional. "Yes, ma'am. Corporal Michael Ramirez, who lost his leg serving our country." The woman's face hardened as she turned to Pearson. "My son is in the army, stationed in South Korea right now." She began removing items from her cart, placing them deliberately on a nearby shelf. "I've shopped at Hartwell's for 20 years, but not anymore. Not if this is how you treat our veterans." As if her action had broken a dam, other customers began abandoning their shopping, some leaving carts full of groceries in the aisles, others taking the time to return items to shelves, but making it clear they would not be completing their purchases. The guests for the wine and cheese event, mostly well-dressed couples who had arrived for the exclusive tasting, stood uncertainly near the entrance. One man in a tailored suit stepped forward. "I'm Robert Keller, president of the Riverbrook Chamber of Commerce," he said, addressing both Pearson and Delgado. "What's happening here?" Before Pearson could speak, an older Marine with silver at his temples answered, "Sir, the manager of this establishment denied service to a disabled Marine veteran, Corporal Michael Ramirez, earlier today. Called him derogatory names and told him veterans aren't welcome here. We're here to express our disagreement with that business practice." Keller's expression darkened. "Is this true, Pearson? Because the Chamber has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, particularly against those who've served our country." "It's being blown out of proportion," Pearson insisted, his confident demeanor crumbling under the collective scrutiny. There was an incident, but it wasn't about him being a veteran. He was disruptive. "Corporal Ramirez walks with a prosthetic leg," Delgado interrupted. "Are you suggesting his disability made him disruptive? Because that would be discrimination on multiple fronts." One of the Marines, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. His civilian clothes were impeccable, a tailored suit that suggested significant success in his post-military career. "Mr. Pearson, I'm Alexander Wright, formerly Captain Wright of the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. I now serve as legal counsel for several businesses in this region. I can assure you that what you've done today opens you and your corporate owners to significant legal liability under both the Americans with Disabilities Act and various veterans' protection statutes." Pearson paled further, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The mention of legal consequences seemed to affect him more deeply than the moral implications had. There's been a misunderstanding. If Mr. Ramirez feels he was treated unfairly, we can certainly discuss compensation." "This isn't about money," Delgado cut in, her voice sharp. "This is about respect, about recognizing the sacrifice of those who've served this country and treating them with the dignity they've earned." The store had grown eerily quiet. The usual ambient music had somehow been turned off, leaving only the hum of refrigeration units and the uncomfortable shifting of feet. Employees stood frozen, at their stations, clearly unsure whether to continue working or wait for direction from their floundering manager. Robert Keller, from the Chamber of Commerce, cleared his throat. "Pearson, I suggest you consider your next actions very carefully. Hartwell's has been a cornerstone of this community for generations. Old Jim Hartwell was himself a Korean War veteran. I can't imagine he'd approve of what's happened here today." A young employee in a Hartwell's apron stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Pearson, I need to say something." The girl, barely out of her teens, visibly gathered her courage. "When that veteran was in here earlier, he wasn't causing any problems. I was stocking the bread aisle when you confronted him. He was just shopping. He even caught a box of crackers before it hit the floor when it got knocked off the shelf." Pearson turned to her, his expression furious. "Ashley, get back to work. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "My brother's in the Marines. He's deployed right now. That could be him someday, coming home injured, just trying to buy groceries. I can't stay silent about this." She unpinned her name tag and placed it on the counter. "I quit." Her action seemed to break the paralysis that had gripped the other employees. One by one, several more stepped forward, removing their name tags or aprons, placing them in a growing pile on the customer service counter. "My grandfather was at Iwo Jima," said an older man who had been bagging groceries. "I can't work here anymore." "My sister's in the Air Force," added a young man from the produce section. "This isn't right." Within minutes, Nearly half the staff had quit on the spot, leaving their stations unmanned, and Pearson staring in disbelief at the pile of discarded name tags. The store's phone began ringing, then ringing again on another line, and again. The remaining customer service employee answered, listened briefly, then looked up at Pearson. "Sir, it's corporate headquarters. They say their social media accounts are being flooded with messages about discrimination against a veteran at this location. They want to speak with you immediately." Pearson fumbled for the phone, his hands shaking slightly as he took the receiver. "This is Pearson. Yes, sir. No, sir, it's not. There's been a..." His face grew increasingly ashen as he listened to whatever was being said on the other end of the line. "Yes, sir, I understand. Right away, sir." He hung up slowly, looking around at the scene his actions had created. Abandoned shopping, carts, departing customers, resigning staff, and 16 Marines standing in silent, disciplined formation throughout his store. "The corporate office has requested that I close the store immediately," he announced, his voice hollow. "All transactions are to be suspended pending an investigation." Staff Sergeant Delgado nodded once. "That seems appropriate. And Mr. Pearson, we'll be expecting a formal apology to Corporal Ramirez, not from corporate, from you personally." Pearson nodded numbly. I'll contact him to arrange that." "No need," came a voice from the entrance. The Marines turned as one, and there stood Michael Ramirez, leaning slightly on a cane he sometimes used on days when his prosthetic caused him discomfort. He moved forward steadily, the Marines parting to create a path for him. "I received about 30 text messages in the last 15 minutes, he said, a hint of bemused resignation in his voice. "Apparently my unit decided to go shopping." Delgado stepped forward, offering a crisp salute that Ramirez returned automatically. "Corporal, we were just discussing the store's customer service policies with Mr. Pearson." "So I see." Michael surveyed the scene, taking in the abandoned carts, the pile of employee name tags, and the looks of respect and solidarity on the faces around him. For a moment, he felt a complex mixture of emotions: embarrassment at being the center of attention, gratitude for the loyalty of his fellow Marines, and a deep, surprising sense of validation. Since losing his leg, he'd worked hard to maintain his independence, to not ask for help, to not be seen as different or needing special accommodation. He'd faced the challenges of his new reality stoically, privately, determined to adapt and overcome on his own terms. He hadn't realized how isolating that approach had become until this moment, seeing the tangible evidence that he was still part of something larger than himself. He approached Pearson, who seemed to shrink under his gaze despite being several inches taller. "Mr. Pearson, I didn't come here for an apology. I came to make sure this situation didn't escalate beyond what's reasonable." Pearson swallowed hard. "Mr. Ramirez, I sincerely apologize for my behavior earlier. It was inappropriate and inexcusable." Michael studied him for a moment, recognizing the fear and self-preservation driving the apology rather than genuine remorse, but he also recognized a teachable moment when he saw one. "Mr. Pearson, do you know why Marines are effective in combat?" The question clearly caught Pearson off guard. What? "It's not because we're tougher or braver than anyone else," Michael continued. "It's because we understand that our strength comes from unity, from having absolute faith that the Marine to our left and our right will be there, no matter what. That kind of bond doesn't end when we take off the uniform." He gestured to the Marines positioned throughout the store. "I didn't ask them to come here today. I wouldn't have asked. But they came anyway because that's what Marines do for each other. Not out of obligation, but out of a profound understanding that we're all connected, that an injury to one is an injury to all." Michael shifted his weight, adjusting his stance to ease the pressure on his prosthetic. "The thing is, Mr. Pearson, that principle doesn't just apply to Marines. It applies to all of us as human beings. When you dismissed me as a cripple, when you suggested my service to this country made me somehow less valuable as a customer, you didn't just insult me. You damaged the fabric that holds communities together." The store was utterly silent. Now everyone present hanging on Michael's words, even those who had been preparing to leave, had paused to listen. "I accept your apology," Michael said finally, "not because I believe you understand what you did wrong, but because holding on to resentment won't help either of us move forward. But I hope you'll take this opportunity to reflect on the kind of person you want to be, the kind of community you want to help build." Robert Keller stepped forward. "Well said, Corporal Ramirez. And speaking for the Chamber of Commerce, I can assure you that we'll be working closely with Hartwell's corporate management to ensure that proper sensitivity training is implemented and that this type of incident never happens again." The former Marine turned attorney Alexander Wright added, "I'll be providing the corporate office with a detailed account of today's events, along with recommendations for appropriate remedial actions. I suspect Mr. Pearson will be receiving additional communication from them very shortly." Pearson stood silently, the full weight of the consequences of his actions finally seeming to register. His career trajectory, which had been steadily upward until today, had likely just hit an insurmountable obstacle. Ashley, the young employee who had quit, approached Michael tentatively. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. My brother's a Marine too, and, well, I'm proud to have stood up for what's right today." Michael smiled at her, the first genuine smile he'd shown since entering the store. "What's your name?" "Ashley Parker, sir." "Well, Ashley Parker, your brother has a sister he can be proud of. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy, especially when it might cost you something important. That takes real courage." She beamed at the compliment, standing a little straighter. One by one, the other employees who had quit came forward to shake Michael's hand or simply express their support. The customers who had abandoned their shopping approached as well, forming an impromptu receiving line. The Marines maintained their positions, watching with quiet approval as the community members demonstrated that they shared the same values of respect and solidarity that defined the Corps. Staff Sergeant Delgado eventually stepped forward. "Corporal Ramirez, I believe our mission here is complete, unless you'd like us to remain." Michael shook his head, emotion making it momentarily difficult to speak. He cleared his throat. "No, Staff Sergeant. I think you've all made your point. Quite effectively, thank you." The 16 Marines began to move toward the exit in the same orderly, disciplined manner in which they had entered. As they passed Michael, each offered a nod, a clasp of the shoulder, or a murmured word of support. Small gestures that carried the weight of their shared experiences and unbreakable bond. As the last Marine reached the door, Michael called, "Out, Staff Sergeant Delgado, a moment." Delgado turned back, her expression questioning. "You mentioned something about Operation Respect," Michael asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Delgado's face remained serious, but her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Standard procedure, Corporal. When a Marine is disrespected, we respond with overwhelming respect. Mission accomplished." "Indeed," Michael agreed, looking around at the transformed atmosphere of the store. What had begun as an incident of discrimination had evolved into a powerful demonstration of community, values, and solidarity. Mission accomplished. As the Marines departed, Robert Keller approached Michael again. "Corporal Ramirez, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'd like to invite you to our next chamber meeting. We're actually forming a veterans business initiative, and someone with your perspective would be invaluable." Ashley, who'd been listening nearby, spoke up. "And if you're looking for work, sir, My uncle owns Parker's Hardware downtown. He's always talking about needing someone, reliable with good problem-solving skills. Actually, interjected one of the wine and cheese event guests who had remained throughout the confrontation. I'm the HR director at Riverbrook Medical Center. We have a veterans hiring preference program, and I'd be very interested in discussing opportunities with you, Corporal Ramirez. Michael found himself surrounded by community members offering connections, opportunities, and genuine welcome, the very things that had seemed so elusive during his difficult transition to civilian life. In the space of an hour, his experience of Riverbrook had transformed from a place where he was trying to invisibly rebuild his life to a community where he was valued and respected. As the store began the process of shutting down for the day, with Pearson mechanically directing the remaining staff to secure refrigerated items and lock the registers, Michael made his way outside. The afternoon sun was warm on his face, and for the first time in months he felt something unfamiliar yet welcome, a sense of belonging, of possibility, of doors opening rather than closing. Across the street, the Marines had gathered, waiting. For him, not in formation now, but in the relaxed posture of friends looking forward to spending time together. Staff Sergeant Delgado stepped forward as he approached. The team thought you might join us for dinner at Riley's pub, she said. Seems like an appropriate way to conclude Operation Respect. Michael looked at the faces of his fellow Marines. Some he had served with directly, others he knew only through the network of veterans in the area. But all were connected by the shared experience of service, by the values that had been forged in training and tempered in combat. They had shown up for him today, not because he had asked, but because that's what Marines did for each other. I'd be honored, he replied. As they walked together toward Riley's pub, Michael realized that the most powerful aspect of what had happened today wasn't the confrontation with Pearson, or even the tangible consequences of that confrontation. It was the reminder that he wasn't alone in his journey, that the Brotherhood of Marines extended beyond active service into civilian life, and that his worth as a person wasn't diminished by his disability, but rather enhanced by the character he had demonstrated in overcoming it. The injury that had taken his leg hadn't taken his identity or his place in the community of warriors who understood that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from standing together in unwavering support of what is right. Riley's pub was an institution in Riverbrook, a warm, wood-paneled establishment that had been serving the community for nearly 4 decades. Originally opened by a Vietnam veteran named Thomas Riley, it was now run by his daughter Catherine, who had maintained her father's tradition of honoring service members. One wall was dedicated to military memorabilia, patches, photos, dog tags, and other items donated by local veterans over the years. A small, tasteful sign near the entrance read, "Military discount every day, because one day isn't enough." As Michael entered with his fellow Marines, Catherine Riley herself greeted them at the door. A tall woman in her 40s with her father's direct gaze and firm handshake, she immediately recognized the group for what it was. "Staff Sergeant Delgado," she said with a warm smile. "Didn't expect to see you and your team today. Special occasion?" Delgado nodded. "You could say that, Ms. Riley. We're celebrating a successful operation with Corporal Ramirez here." Catherine turned to Michael, taking in his prosthetic leg with a glance that contained neither pity nor discomfort, just straightforward acknowledgement. "First time at Riley's, Corporal?" "Yes, ma'am," Michael replied. "I've only been in Riverbrook for about 6 months." "Well, welcome to the family," she said, gesturing to the largest table in the pub. "That table's reserved for you and your squad. First round's on the house." As the Marines settled in, the atmosphere in Riley's shifted subtly. Other patrons, some veterans themselves, Others simply regulars who understood the significance of such a gathering, nodded respectfully or raised glasses in quiet salute. There was none of the awkward tension that had filled Hartwell's market, just a sense of community and belonging. A server approached with a tray of drinks, beers for most, water or soda for those who didn't partake. Compliments of the couple. At the bar, she explained, gesturing to an elderly man and woman who raised their glasses when the Marines looked over. The old man stood with the help of a cane and made his way to their table. "Name's Frank Reeves," he said, his voice gruff, but warm. 82nd Airborne, 1968 to 1972, Vietnam. He nodded to Michael. "Heard what happened over at Hartwell's. Word travels fast in Riverbrook. Wanted to say welcome to town, son, and sorry that was your introduction to our community." Michael stood to shake the man's hand. "Thank you, sir, but today has shown me that one person doesn't represent a community." Frank nodded approvingly. "Well said. My Eleanor there," he gestured to his wife at the bar, "she's been telling me for 60 years that I need to let people finish their own sentences instead of jumping in, but I wanted to come over right away when I heard who you all were." He paused, seeming to struggle briefly with emotion. "It does an old soldier's heart good to see that the brotherhood is still strong. In my day, coming home wasn't always. Well, let's just say people didn't always stand up like you folks did today." One of the older Marines at the table, a gunnery sergeant named Hector Ramirez, no relation to Michael, spoke up. "We stand on the shoulders of giants, sir. The welcome home that you deserved, we're making sure this generation gets it." Frank blinked rapidly, nodded once sharply, then returned to his wife, his back straight, despite his years. "Staff Sergeant." Delgado raised her glass. "To the Marines who came before us, the Marines beside us, and the Marines who will follow." "Ura," came the unified response as glasses clinked together. As they settled into conversation, Michael found himself seated between Delgado and a young Marine he hadn't met before, named Lance Corporal Jensen. The atmosphere was comfortable, the kind of easy camaraderie that Michael had missed desperately. Since his medical retirement, here he didn't need to explain himself or his experiences. Here, everyone understood. "How's the transition been?" Jensen asked quietly during a lull in the broader conversation. The young Marine couldn't have been more than 23, but his eyes held the particular gravity of someone who had seen combat. Michael considered the question, appreciating its directness. "Challenging," he admitted, "more than I expected. The physical stuff, the rehab, learning to use the prosthetic, that was hard, but it was concrete, had clear goals, measurable progress." He took a sip of his beer. "It's the other parts that blindsided me, the lack of structure, the feeling that civilians are speaking a different language sometimes." Jensen nodded. "I'm facing medical retirement myself," he said, gesturing to his right shoulder. 3 reconstructive surgeries after an RPG in Helmand Province. Doctors say I'll never regain full range of motion." Michael studied the younger Marine, recognizing the mixture of uncertainty and determination in his expression. "When's your discharge date?" 6 weeks, Jensen replied. "Already started out processing at Quantico." "Got plans?" Jensen shrugged his good shoulder. "My dad wants me to come work at his construction company back in Nebraska. Says they can find something I can do with a bum arm." Michael nodded, understanding the complex emotions behind that simple statement, the desire to be useful, the fear of dependency, the struggle to redefine purpose. "You know, before today, I'd have told you the transition is something you have to figure out on your own, that civilians won't understand, and other vets are all fighting their own battles." He gestured around the table. "But I think I had it wrong. I've been trying to do everything solo, like proving I could handle civilian life was another mission." Jensen leaned forward slightly. "And now?" Now I'm thinking the real mission might be learning to accept connection again. Not just with other Marines, but with the whole community. Michael smiled slightly. You should have seen Hartwell's today. It wasn't just our squad that stood up. Regular citizens, employees, people I'd never met were willing to put themselves on the line. Across the table, a Marine Corps captain named Rivera, who had been listening, joined the conversation. That's the thing they don't teach us properly during transition assistance. We spend our entire careers learning to be self-sufficient, to drive on no matter what. They tell us to ask for help if we need it, but they don't really show us how, or give us permission to see it as strength rather than weakness. Exactly, Michael agreed. I've been living in Riverbrook for 6 months, and until today, I probably hadn't had more than a 5-minute conversation with anyone outside the VA hospital. I was existing, not living. Staff Sergeant Delgado, who had been engaged in another conversation, turned her attention to their discussion. That's why I started the Veteran Integration Program on base, she said, trying to create a bridge between the military community and the civilian world. It's still small, mentorship pairings, community service projects, that kind of thing, but it's growing. Michael raised an eyebrow. I hadn't heard about that. That's because you've been in hermit mode, Ramirez, she replied with the blunt affection unique to those who have served together. You should come by the base next week. We're doing a career workshop with local businesses. After what happened today, I think you'll find a lot of doors open to you in this town. Before Michael could respond, the pub's door opened and a familiar face appeared. Ashley, the young employee who had quit Hartwell's Market during the confrontation. She scanned the room anxiously until she spotted the table of Marines, then approached hesitantly. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. But I wanted to let Corporal Ramirez know that my uncle, the one who owns Parker's Hardware, he said you should come by tomorrow if you're interested in talking about a position. He's looking for someone to manage inventory and help customers, and he said after what he heard about today, he'd hire you on the spot. Michael was momentarily speechless, caught off guard by the unexpected opportunity and the genuine kindness behind it. Staff Sergeant Delgado spoke up smoothly. Thank you, Ashley. Corporal Ramirez will certainly consider the offer. Would you like to join us? I believe we have room at the table. Ashley shook her head, blushing slightly at being addressed so formally by the staff sergeant. Thank you, but I can't stay. I have class in an hour. I'm studying nursing at the community college, but I just wanted to come by and let you know. My uncle's serious about the job. He was a Marine too back in the 90s. Gulf War? Asked one of the older Marines at the table. Ashley nodded. Yes, sir. He was in Kuwait. What's his name? The Marine pressed. James Parker. The Marine broke into a wide grin. Jimbo. Parker, from 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines? Ashley's eyes widened. Yes, that's him. Well, I'll be damned. Jimbo and I served together. Hell of a Marine. He turned to Michael. If that job offer is coming from Jimbo Parker, you can bet it's solid. He doesn't say things he doesn't mean. Michael found himself smiling at the serendipity of it all, the unexpected connections forming, the sense of a community revealing itself around him. Thank you, Ashley. Tell your uncle I'll be there tomorrow morning. After Ashley left, the conversation at the table shifted to the small-world nature of the Marine Corps, with stories of unexpected reunions and chance encounters across the globe. Michael listened, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the beer in front of him. For the first time since his injury, he felt the tension he'd been carrying begin to truly unwind, the constant vigilance, the self-imposed isolation, the struggle to redefine his identity beyond his service and his disability. As the evening progressed, more Riverbrook residents stopped by their table, some veterans themselves, others simply community members who had heard about the incident at Hartwell's and wanted to express their support. Michael was introduced to the owner of a local gym who offered him free membership, a physical therapist who specialized in working with amputees, and even the mayor, who apologized for Pearson's behavior and invited Michael to speak at the upcoming Veterans Day ceremony. By the time they finished their meals, Michael had collected more business cards and phone numbers than he had in the previous 6 months combined. But more importantly, he had begun to see Riverbrook not just as the place where he lived, but as a community where he belonged. As the gathering began to wind down, Captain Rivera approached Michael again. "So, Ramirez, what's next for you? Besides checking out this hardware store job tomorrow?" Michael considered the question thoughtfully. I think it's time I stopped just surviving and started building something new. Not trying to recreate what I had in the Corps, but not hiding from it either." Rivera nodded approvingly. "That's the breakthrough moment, right there. Took me nearly 2 years to get to that point after I got out." He glanced at Michael's prosthetic. "Mind if I ask about your PT regimen? I'm asking because my sister runs an adaptive sports program over in Easton, about 20 miles from here. They do everything from wheelchair basketball to competitive swimming, always looking for new participants and mentors." "I've been doing the standard rehab at the VA," Michael replied. "Honestly, haven't thought much beyond that, just focused on mastering the basics with the prosthetic." "You should check it out," Rivera urged. "Some of the best therapy happens outside the hospital, and these adaptive athletes, man, talk about inspiration. My sister has a guy in her program, triple amputee, who completed a marathon last year. Changed my whole perspective on what's possible." Michael felt a flicker of interest, something he hadn't experienced in months. "Maybe I will." Staff Sergeant Delgado, who had been settling the bill despite Catherine Riley's attempts to comp the entire meal, rejoined them. "Ramirez, we're heading out. Some of us have early duty tomorrow. Need a ride home?" "I can walk," Michael began, then caught himself. "Actually, yes, a ride would be great, thank you." Delgado's smile showed she recognized the significance of his acceptance. Good man, progress already. As they exited Riley's pub, the evening air had cooled, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The Marines exchanged farewells with the precise combination of formality and warmth that characterized their brotherhood. Firm handshakes, solid claps on the shoulder, and the occasional aura that civilians might find incomprehensible, but that carried volumes of meaning among those who had earned the title of Marine. Delgado's vehicle was a practical SUV, meticulously maintained like everything in her life. As they drove through Riverbrook toward Michael's apartment, she broke the comfortable silence. "You know, Ramirez, what happened today at Hartwell's? That wasn't just about standing up for you." Michael glanced at her. "I figured as much. The way I see it, every time discrimination goes unchallenged, it normalizes it. Makes it a little easier for the next guy to do the same thing. And maybe the next target isn't a Marine with a whole squad behind him. Maybe it's someone alone, already vulnerable." Michael nodded slowly. "So it was about drawing a line." "Exactly. Making it clear that in this community, certain behaviors aren't acceptable. Period." She navigated a turn with precise control. "But it was also about you, Ramirez. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate it," Michael said quietly. "More than I can say. Though I'm still processing the fact that you all basically shut down a grocery store on my behalf." Delgado chuckled. "Not exactly standard operating procedure, I'll grant you that, but effective." Her expression grew more serious. "When we got your message, there wasn't even a discussion about whether to respond. Just how. That's what I want you to take away from today, Ramirez. You're still one of us, always will be." They pulled up in front of Michael's apartment building, but before he could thank her and exit, Delgado continued. The transition. It's not about leaving the core behind. It's about bringing the best parts of it with you into civilian life. The discipline, the integrity, the commitment to something larger than yourself. She fixed him with her direct gaze. But it's also about adaptation, learning to translate those values into a different context. Michael considered her words, recognizing their truth. I think I've been stuck in between. Not fully civilian, but not active duty either. Caught in limbo. That's normal, Delgado assured him. But you don't have to navigate it alone. That's the point we were making today. And from what I saw at Riley's, this community is ready to embrace you, Ramirez. All you have to do is let them. Michael felt something shift within him. A perspective changing, a weight lifting. I'm beginning to see that, he admitted. Today was eye-opening in more ways than one. Good. Delgado handed him a business card. Veteran support. Group meets at the base every Thursday evening. Mixture of active duty and veterans. No pressure, no required sharing, just community. Consider coming this week. Michael took the card, nodding. I will. And Delgado, thank you for everything today. Just doing my job, Corporal, she replied with a slight smile. Marines take care of their own. Now get some rest. Sounds like you've got a job interview tomorrow. After Delgado drove away, Michael stood for a moment outside his apartment building, looking up at the stars emerging in the night sky. The same stars that had shone down on him during nights in Iraq, in Afghanistan, on bases around the world. There was comfort in their constancy, in the knowledge that some things remained unchanged, regardless of the transformations in his life. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, the day's events replaying in his mind. What had begun as one of his lowest moments since the injury had transformed into something unexpectedly affirming. The confrontation at Hartwell's had been painful, but the response, not just from his fellow Marines, but from the broader community, had revealed possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to see. Inside his apartment, the space felt different somehow, though nothing had physically changed. The meticulous organization, the sparse decorations, the military precision, all remained the same. But his perception had shifted. What had been a shelter, a place to retreat from a world he no longer felt part of, now seemed like a temporary station, a launching point for whatever came next. Michael moved to a shelf where he kept a few military mementos, his bronze star, a folded flag, a framed photo of his unit before his final deployment. He picked up the photo, studying the faces of men and women who had been closer than family. Some were still in his life, as today had powerfully demonstrated. Others had moved on to different postings, different challenges. A few would never return. He had survived when others hadn't, had been given a chance to build a new life when others had been denied that opportunity. Until today, he had viewed that responsibility primarily as a burden, a weight of obligation to live well enough to honor their sacrifice. Now, he began to see it also as a privilege, an opportunity to carry forward not just their memory, but the values and bonds they had shared. Michael placed the photo back on the shelf and moved to his small desk. He opened his laptop and navigated to his email, finding a message from earlier that day that he had ignored, an invitation from the local veteran service organization to a community outreach event that weekend. He had deleted similar invitations. For months, always finding reasons to avoid such gatherings. This time, he clicked reply and typed a simple message. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. Michael Ramirez, USMC, Retomor. As he sent the email, Michael felt a sense of purpose begin to crystallize, not the sharp, defined mission parameters of his military service, but something more organic and evolving. A mission nonetheless, to reconnect, to contribute, to bring his unique experiences and perspective to his community, to accept help when needed and offer it when possible. The path forward wouldn't be without challenges. His physical limitations were real, and the psychological adjustments of transition would continue to require work and patience. But for the first time since his injury, Michael felt truly hopeful. Not just about surviving civilian life, but about thriving in it. He remembered something his first drill instructor had told his platoon during the grueling weeks of boot camp. The Corps doesn't just make Marines. It reveals what was already there inside you. Strength you didn't know you had, courage you hadn't yet needed, and bonds you couldn't have imagined. Today had revealed something similar about Riverbrook, about the civilian community he had kept at arm's length. It had revealed connections waiting to be made, opportunities waiting to be seized, and a support network broader and more inclusive than he had allowed himself to believe possible. Michael Ramirez, Marine, veteran, amputee, but more than any of those labels, a man ready to begin the next chapter of his life, closed his laptop and felt, for the first time in months, genuinely looking forward to tomorrow. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Michael's apartment, creating patterns of light and shadow across the floor. For the first time in months, he had slept deeply, without the restless anxiety that had plagued his nights since returning to civilian life. He moved through his morning routine with deliberate precision, the discipline of his Marine years, translated into civilian habits. But today, there was an energy in his movements that had been absent before. As he dressed for his meeting, with James Jimbo Parker at the hardware store, Michael considered his wardrobe carefully. Since his medical retirement, he had primarily worn the most practical, comfortable clothing that accommodated his prosthetic. Today, he reached past his usual jeans and t-shirts to select a crisp button-down shirt and khaki pants he had purchased months ago, but never worn. The simple act of dressing differently felt symbolic somehow, a small step toward embracing new possibilities rather than simply existing in the aftermath of loss. His phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was from Staff Sergeant Delgado. "Parker's hardware opens at 800. Jimbo's a good man. Be yourself. That's all he'll expect. Report back after mission complete." Michael smiled at the familiar military vernacular. He replied with a simple, "Roger that," appreciating Delgado's way of framing the job interview as a mission. It helped bridge the gap between his former life and the new one he was tentatively beginning to build. Another text arrived, this one, from an unknown number. "Corporal Ramirez, Robert Keller here from the Chamber of Commerce. Word about yesterday's events at Hartwell's is spreading. Local news wants to run a story. Thought you should know. Happy to coordinate if you're willing to speak with them." Michael considered the message carefully. His instinct was to decline. He had never sought attention for his service or his injury, and the idea of being in the public eye made him uncomfortable. But he also recognized that the story wasn't just about him. It was about standing against discrimination, about community values, about the bonds between veterans and civilians. Perhaps there was value in sharing that message more broadly. He texted back, "Appreciate the heads up, Mr. Keller. Not looking for personal attention, but if the story helps promote veteran integration and community support, I'm willing to participate. Let's discuss after my meeting at Parker's Hardware." This morning, with that decision made, Michael gathered his keys, wallet, and phone. He hesitated briefly by the door, then returned to the bedroom to retrieve something from his dresser drawer, a small challenge coin that had been presented to him by his commanding officer after his first deployment. He slipped it into his pocket, a tangible reminder of who he was and what he had accomplished, not a talisman, but a grounding point, connecting past to present as he stepped toward the future. The walk to Parker's Hardware took Michael through the heart of Riverbrook's downtown. The morning air was crisp and clear, small-town America awakening to another day. Shopkeepers swept sidewalks, early commuters clutched coffee cups, and delivery trucks made their rounds. It was a scene Michael had observed hundreds of times since moving here, but today he experienced it differently, not as an outsider looking in, but as a participant in the community's daily rhythm. Several people nodded or waved as he passed. Some he recognized from Riley's pub the previous evening, others complete strangers who somehow seemed to know him. News travelled fast in small towns, and clearly the story of what had happened at Hartwell's market had spread overnight. But the acknowledgements weren't uncomfortable or pitying, they were respectful, one neighbour recognizing another. Parker's hardware occupied a corner building that had clearly stood for generations, its brick facade weathered but well maintained. The large display windows featured a practical array of seasonal items, garden tools now giving way to early autumn necessities. A simple sign above the door read, "Parker's Hardware, serving Riverbrook since 1978, with a small Marine Corps emblem in the corner, subtle but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for." As Michael approached the entrance, the door opened and a burly man in his 50s emerged. He wore a Parker's Hardware polo shirt stretched across broad shoulders that still carried the military bearing of someone who had served. His hair was cropped short, silver at the temples, and his face creased into an immediate smile when he saw Michael. "Corporal Ramirez," he said, extending his hand. "James Parker. Most folks call me Jimbo. Been expecting you. Come on in." Michael shook the offered hand, recognizing the firm grip of a fellow Marine. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." "Drop the sir," Parker said with a chuckle. "I've been a civilian too long for that, and the opportunity is all mine. Not every day I get to meet the Marine who got half the town talking." He ushered Michael into the store, which smelled of wood, metal, and the particular blend of products unique to hardware stores everywhere. Despite the building's age, the interior was immaculately organized. Tools arranged by function, paint samples displayed in a rainbow of options, plumbing supplies neatly categorized and labeled. 3 employees were already at work. An older man arranging a display of flashlights, a middle-aged woman at the register, and a young man in his 20s assisting a customer in the electrical aisle. "Let me give you the nickel tour," Parker said, leading Michael through the space. "Been in this location since my father opened it in '78. I took over after my time in the Corps, Desert Storm era. We're not the biggest hardware store in the county, but we pride ourselves on knowing our inventory and our customers. Most folks who come in here know exactly what they need. They just don't know what it's called or where to find it." As they walked, Parker greeted each employee by name, briefly introducing Michael. Each responded with warm welcome, clearly already aware of who he was. They reached a small office at the back of the store, where Parker gestured Michael to a chair and took a seat behind a desk cluttered with invoices, catalogs, and a framed photo of a younger Parker in desert camis with his Marine unit. "So," Parker began, leaning back in his chair, "my niece Ashley tells me you handled yourself with some serious discipline yesterday when that manager at Hartwell's showed his true colors. Can't say I'm surprised. Marines aren't known for losing their cool even when justified." "I appreciate your niece standing up like she did," Michael replied. "That took courage." Parker nodded, a flash of pride crossing his features. "Ashley's got more backbone than most. Reminds me of her mother, my sister. Never backs down from what's right." He studied Michael for a moment. "So, let's talk about why you're here. I understand you're looking for work." "I'm looking for purpose," Michael answered honestly. "Work is part of that, but it's more about finding a place where I can contribute meaningfully." Parker's expression shifted from casual friendliness to genuine interest. "That's a better answer than, 'I need a job. Tell me about your skills. What did you do in the Corps?'" For the next half hour, they discussed Michael's military experience, his training in logistics, his leadership of a squad, his ability to solve problems under pressure. Parker asked insightful questions that revealed his own understanding. of how military skills translated to civilian applications. He explained the position he was looking to fill: inventory management and customer service, with potential for growth into assistant manager, as the current one was retiring within the year. "The way I see it," Parker concluded, "you've got the exact skill set I need. You understand systems, you know how to work with people, and you've got the Marine Corps attention to detail that's critical in a business where selling someone the wrong part can mean they're back an hour later with a flooded basement or a half-disassembled sink." Michael nodded, appreciating the straightforward assessment. "I'd need to learn your inventory, your procedures. I don't have specific hardware experience." Parker waved away the concern. "Nobody knows everything about hardware when they start. That's learned. What can't be taught is character, reliability, and the ability to keep a level head when things get hectic." He leaned forward. "Let me be direct, Ramirez. I want to offer you the job. Full-time, benefits included, starting salary that respects your experience. And I'll work with you on scheduling if you need flexibility for VA appointments or anything related to your prosthetic." The offer was clear and generous, without a hint of charity or pity. One veteran to another, recognizing value rather than focusing on limitations. Michael felt a surge of gratitude for the straightforward approach. "I'd like to accept," he said, meeting Parker's gaze directly. "When would you want me to start?" "How's Monday sound? Gives you the weekend to prepare, me time to get the paperwork ready." Parker stood and extended his hand again. "Welcome to Parker's Hardware, Ramirez. We're proud to have you on the team." As they shook hands to seal the agreement, the office door opened slightly, and Ashley peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt, Uncle Jim, but there's someone here from the Riverbrook Gazette wanting to talk to Corporal Ramirez about what happened yesterday." Parker raised an eyebrow at Michael. "Your call. We can send them on their way if you'd prefer." Michael considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No, it's all right. Like I told Mr. Keller from the Chamber of Commerce, if the story helps promote veteran integration and community support, it's worth telling." They followed Ashley out to the main floor of the hardware store, where a young woman with a press badge and a notebook waited. She introduced herself as Elaine Wong, a reporter for the local paper, and asked if Michael would be willing to answer a few questions about the incident at Hartwell's Market. "I'll give you some space," Parker said, but Michael gestured for him to stay. "Actually, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate your perspective too, as a fellow veteran and business owner." The interview lasted about 20 minutes, with Michael recounting the events at Hartwell's with straightforward honesty, neither dramatizing nor downplaying what had occurred. When asked about his feelings on Victor Pearson's behavior, he was measured in his response. "I don't believe Mr. Pearson's actions reflect the values of this community," Michael said. "What was more significant to me was how quickly others stood up. The employees who quit rather than be associated with discrimination, the customers who walked out, and of course my fellow Marines who showed up to make a statement without raising voices or creating conflict." When Wong asked about his transition to civilian life, Michael hesitated briefly, then decided on honesty. "It's been challenging," he admitted. "Losing my leg was difficult, but losing my sense of purpose and community was harder in many ways. Yesterday reminded me that community exists if you're willing to engage with it. That's a lesson I needed." Parker added his own thoughts on the importance of businesses actively supporting veteran integration. "It's not about charity," he emphasized, echoing his earlier words to Michael. "It's about recognizing the valuable skills and experiences veterans bring to the table. That's why I've always made hiring veterans a priority at Parker's Hardware, and why I'm proud to announce that Corporal Ramirez will be joining our team starting Monday." Wong's eyebrows rose at this news, and she quickly made notes. "So something good has already come from yesterday's incident." Michael smiled slightly. "Life has a way of creating unexpected paths. Yesterday morning, I was just trying to buy groceries. Today, I have a job offer, connections with fellow veterans in the area, and a much clearer sense of belonging in Riverbrook. After the reporter departed, promising the article would run. In tomorrow's edition, Parker clapped Michael on the shoulder. That was well handled, Ramirez. Straight and honest, no drama. The town will appreciate that approach. Thank you for supporting the narrative, Michael replied, about veterans' skills, not just our challenges. It's the truth, Parker said simply. Now, let me introduce you more properly to the team. You'll be working with them starting Monday. Might as well get acquainted. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions and orientation. Michael met the full staff of Parker's Hardware, 8 employees total, ranging from high school students working part-time to seasoned professionals with decades of experience in various trades who had settled into retail in their later years. 2 were veterans themselves, an older Vietnam-era Army veteran named Howard who managed the paint department, and a young woman named Jessica who had served 4 years in the Navy before returning to her hometown. By lunchtime, Michael had a basic understanding of the store's layout, inventory system, and customer base. Parker invited him to stay for the staff lunch, apparently a Friday tradition at the hardware store, where everyone gathered in the break room to share a meal catered by the deli across the street. The atmosphere was welcoming and unpretentious, the conversation flowing easily between work topics and personal stories. Michael found himself gradually relaxing, contributing to the discussion when appropriate, but also simply observing the dynamics of what would soon be his workplace. It felt right, structured enough to be familiar, casual enough to be comfortable. As the lunch break ended and employees returned to their stations, Parker walked Michael to the door. "See you Monday, Ear 745, for orientation paperwork, before we open at 0800. Any questions before then, just call my cell. Ashley gave you the number, right?" "She did," Michael confirmed. "And thank you again for the opportunity and the welcome." "Like I said, the opportunity is mine," Parker replied. "And Ramirez, it's good to have another Marine in the building. Semper Fi." Semper Fi," Michael echoed, the familiar exchange bringing a sense of continuity between his past and his emerging future. As he left the hardware store and began walking back toward his apartment, Michael felt a lightness that had been absent for months. The weight of uncertainty that had pressed upon him since his medical discharge had not disappeared entirely, but it had shifted, become more manageable. Having a job, a purpose, a place to be expected and valued, these were foundation, stones upon which to rebuild. His phone buzzed with a text message from Staff Sergeant Delgado. "Mission status update requested." Michael smiled and typed back, "Mission accomplished. Employment secured starting Monday." The response came almost immediately. "Outstanding. Celebration in order. Pizza and beer at my place tonight. 1900 hours. Several squad members attending. Presence requested." In the past, Michael might have declined, retreated to the solitude that had become his comfort zone. Today, he replied without hesitation, "Affirmative. We'll bring beverages. Address." After receiving Delgado's address, Michael continued homeward, his mind processing the rapid changes of the past 24 hours, from the humiliation at Hartwell's to the solidarity at Riley's pub to the opportunity at Parker's Hardware. The trajectory was positive, promising. As he approached his apartment building, he noticed something unexpected. A delivery truck from Riverbrook Furniture parked outside. Puzzled, he quickened his pace. He hadn't ordered any furniture. In front of the building stood Frank Reeves, the elderly veteran he had met at Riley's pub the previous evening, leaning on his cane and supervising as 2 delivery men unloaded what appeared to be a recliner from the truck. "Ah, there you are, son," Frank called when he spotted Michael. "Was beginning to think we'd have to leave this with a neighbor." Mr. Reeves, Michael said, confused. What's this? Frank gestured to the recliner. This, Corporal, is what we call in technical terms a welcome to the community gift. Eleanor and I got to talking last night after meeting you. We remembered how it was when I came home from Vietnam. Didn't have much in the way of furniture, and with my leg giving me trouble, a proper chair made all the difference. He nodded toward Michael's prosthetic. Figured you might appreciate the same. Michael was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity. Mr. Reeves, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's already paid for and non-returnable, Frank stated matter-of-factly. And it's Frank, not Mr. Reeves. Now, are you going to show these fellows where to put it, or should we just leave it on the sidewalk? Recognizing the stubborn determination of a fellow veteran, Michael yielded with grace. Thank you, Frank. This is incredibly kind. Please come up and tell me where you think it should go. The delivery men carried the recliner, a handsome, sturdy piece in a neutral brown leather, up to Michael's apartment. Frank followed more slowly, navigating the stairs with the deliberate care of someone whose joints had served long and passed their warranty. Inside, he surveyed the sparsely furnished living room with an appraising eye. Over there, he decided, pointing to a corner near the window. Good light for reading during the day, and you'll be able to see the TV from there too. Once the recliner was positioned and the delivery men departed, Frank settled into Michael's couch with a sigh. Mind if I rest a minute before heading back down? These stairs are murder on my hip. Of course, Michael said, still processing the unexpected gift. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Water would be fine, Frank replied. Then I want to hear about this job my Eleanor tells me you've landed at Parker's Hardware. Jimbo's a good man, known him since he was a pup. As Michael brought water for both of them, he found himself sharing the details of his morning. The job offer, the interview with the local paper, the welcome from the hardware store staff. Frank listened with the particular attention of someone who had lived long enough to value other people's stories as much as his own. Sounds like you've had quite a turn of fortune in the last day, Frank observed when Michael had finished. From being kicked out of a grocery store to finding your place in the community. It's been unexpected, Michael acknowledged. Yesterday morning I felt isolated, like I was just existing in Riverbrook without really being part of it. Now suddenly I have connections everywhere I turn. Frank nodded, his weathered face thoughtful. That's how it works sometimes. You think you're alone until something happens that forces people to show their true colors. He took a sip of water. After Vietnam, I came home to a country that didn't much want to acknowledge what we'd been through. Found myself pretty isolated, angry too. Then one day my car broke down outside of town, and this stranger stopped to help. Turned out he was a Korean War vet. He got me to his buddy's garage, refused to take any payment, just said, "Pass it on when you can." He gestured around the apartment. That's how community really works. Not big institutions or government programs, though. Those have their place. It's one person reaching out to another, creating a chain of connection. Yesterday at Hartwell's, you were one link in that chain. Today, with this job at Parker's, you're another link. The recliner, that's Eleanor and me adding our link. The simple wisdom resonated with Michael. Throughout his military career, he had been part of something larger than himself, a unit, a mission, a tradition of service. Since his injury, he had felt disconnected from that larger purpose, adrift in a civilian world that seemed to lack the same cohesion and clarity of mission. What Frank was describing was a different kind of connection, not based on rank or uniform or clearly defined objectives, but no less real for its informality. I appreciate the perspective, Frank, Michael said sincerely, and the recliner. I'm not sure how to properly thank you and Eleanor. Frank waved away the gratitude. Like I said, pass it on when you can. That's thanks enough. He glanced at his watch. I should be getting back. Eleanor will be wondering where I've gotten to. Michael helped the older veteran navigate the stairs back down to street level, where Eleanor waited in their car. She rolled down the window as they approached. "So, did he try to refuse it?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Of course he did," Frank replied. "Marines are stubborn that way." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Good. The ones who deserve help are usually the last to accept it." She fixed Michael with a warm gaze. "Dinner at our place next Thursday. Frank will text you the address. No arguments." As the Reeves drove away, Michael stood on the sidewalk, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Gratitude, humility, and a growing sense of responsibility to honor the connections being offered to him. The path forward was becoming clearer. Not a return to what had been, but a new integration of his military past with his civilian present, built on the foundation of community that had revealed itself in these unexpected ways. He checked the time. Several hours remained before Delgado's gathering. Time enough to rest, to reflect, and to plan his next steps in what was rapidly becoming not just a recovery, but a rediscovery of purpose. 3 months had passed since the confrontation at Hartwell's Market. Riverbrook had transitioned from the golden hues of autumn to the crisp white of early winter, a light dusting of snow transforming the town into a scene worthy of a New England postcard. Main Street businesses had decorated for the holidays, warm lights twinkling in windows and festive wreaths adorning doors. Michael Ramirez stood outside Parker's Hardware, making final adjustments to the store's holiday display. Under his guidance, the front windows featured not just the expected seasonal items, snow shovels, ice melt, weather stripping, but also a thoughtfully designed tribute to local veterans. Photos of community members who had served, spanning conflicts from World War II to Afghanistan, were interspersed with information about the Veteran Support Network and resources available to those transitioning to civilian life. The display had been Michael's idea, implemented with enthusiastic support from Jimbo Parker. In the 3 months since joining the hardware store team, Michael had proven himself invaluable, mastering the inventory system within weeks, developing innovative solutions for streamlining operations, and establishing himself as a knowledgeable, patient presence that customers sought out for advice on their projects. "Looks good, Ramirez," came Jimbo's voice as the owner stepped outside to survey the completed display. "Best window we've had in years." "Thanks, boss," Michael replied, stepping back to get a better perspective on the arrangement. Wanted to make sure it balanced the practical with the meaningful. People need snow shovels, but they also need reminders of what connects us. Jimbo nodded appreciatively. "Mission accomplished, I'd say. By the way, that reporter from the Gazette called again. Wants to do a follow-up story on how things have changed since the Hartwell's incident. Told her to talk to you directly." Michael smiled slightly. Elaine's persistent. I'll give her that. The initial article about the confrontation at Hartwell's had generated unexpected attention, not just locally but regionally, as other news outlets picked up the story. Michael had received messages of support from veterans across the state, and the incident had sparked community discussions about how to better integrate and support those who had served. Hartwell's Market itself had undergone significant changes. Victor Pearson had been promptly transferred by the corporate office, replaced by a manager who happened to be a Navy veteran. The new management had implemented a veterans discount program and made a substantial donation to the local VA hospital's rehabilitation center. What could have been a divisive incident had instead catalyzed positive change throughout Riverbrook. "You going to talk to her?" Jimbo asked, referring to the reporter. Michael considered the question. "I think so. Not for my sake, but because the story's evolved into something bigger than what happened that day. It's about how communities can rally around veterans, create meaningful opportunities. That's worth sharing." The bell above the store's door jingled as Ashley emerged, bundled against the cold. "Uncle Jim, Mrs. Hernandez is on the phone about that special order backsplash tile." She turned to Michael with a smile. "The display looks amazing. You've got a real eye for this." "Thanks, Ashley," Michael replied. In the months since they'd first met during the Hartwell's confrontation, Ashley had become something of a younger sister to him. She worked part-time at the hardware store while pursuing her nursing degree, and they had developed a comfortable rapport, bonding over shared experiences with military family members. Jimbo headed back inside to take the call, leaving Michael and Ashley to make final adjustments to the display. "So," Ashley said casually, "are you nervous about tonight?" Michael adjusted a strand of lights before answering. "A little. It's been a long time since I've done any public speaking." "You'll be great," she assured him. "My clinical psychology professor says the best talks come from lived experience, not theory, and nobody can question yours." Tonight was the culmination of months of gradual reintegration into community life. Michael had been invited to be the keynote speaker at the Riverbrook Winter Community Dinner, an annual event that brought together residents from all walks of life to share a meal and reflect on the year. His topic, building bridges, veteran, integration, and community strength. The invitation had come from Robert Keller at the Chamber of Commerce, who had been impressed by Michael's balanced, thoughtful comments in the newspaper following the Hartwell's incident. What had started as a request for a few remarks had evolved into a featured address after Michael shared some of his ideas about how communities could better support veterans transitioning to civilian life. "I just hope I do the topic justice," Michael said. "It's not just my story, it's about all veterans trying to find their place after service." "That's exactly why you're the right person to speak," Ashley replied, with the direct honesty that characterized their friendship. "You've lived it, you're still living it, and you're thoughtful about the bigger picture. People will listen to that." Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Staff Sergeant Delgado. "Speech ready for tonight? Marines will be present in force, no pressure." He chuckled and typed back, "Ready as I'll ever be. Thanks for the advance warning." Over the past months, his relationship with Delgado and the other Marines had evolved from the initial solidarity during the Hartwell's confrontation to genuine friendship. The Thursday Veterans Support Group at the base had become a fixture in his schedule, providing not just camaraderie but practical support during his ongoing transition. "Speaking of tonight," Ashley said, checking her watch, "shouldn't you be heading home to get ready? It's already past 3, and the dinner starts at 6. Michael nodded. "Just about finished here. You'll be there?" "Wouldn't miss it," she confirmed. "My whole family's coming. Even my brother got leave to come home for it." "Your brother's back?" Michael asked, surprised. Ashley's brother Marcus, the Marine she had mentioned during their first meeting, had been deployed for the past 9 months. She beamed with pride. "Got in last night. He read the article about what happened at Hartwell's while he was overseas. Said he was proud his sister stood up for a fellow Marine." The simple statement warmed Michael. "Well, I'm looking forward to meeting him. Better head out and get ready. See you tonight." As Michael walked home through the lightly falling snow, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in the 3 months since that confrontation at the grocery store. What had begun as a painful reminder of his outsider status had catalyzed connections that now formed the foundation of his civilian life. His apartment, once spartanly functional, had gradually transformed into a true home. The recliner from Frank and Eleanor Reeves had been joined by other personal touches, framed photos of new friends alongside his military mementos, books on local history gifted by community members, a handcrafted coffee table made by Howard, From the hardware store, most significantly, Michael had begun volunteering as a peer mentor for newly discharged veterans at the VA hospital, drawing on his own experience to help others navigate the challenges of transition. What had started as occasional visits had evolved into a structured program, with Michael working alongside medical professionals to develop resources specifically tailored to amputees returning to civilian life. Inside his apartment, Michael found a package leaning against his door, a garment bag with a note from Captain Rivera, who had become a close friend. "For tonight, can't have our keynote speaker looking like a hardware store employee. Kidding, mostly. See you there." Inside the bag was a tailored navy blue blazer with a small Marine Corps pin on the lapel, understated but unmistakable to those who recognized it. The gesture was typical of Rivera, who understood the importance of both appearance and identity during significant moments. Michael showered and dressed carefully, choosing the new blazer over a light blue shirt and khaki pants. He considered wearing his prosthetic dress leg, which had a more natural appearance but was slightly less comfortable than his everyday model. After a moment's consideration, he opted for the functional prosthetic. His leg was part of his story, part of what he would be speaking about tonight. No need to disguise it. As he prepared to leave, his phone rang, a FaceTime call from his parents in Arizona. He answered to see their familiar faces, his mother's eyes bright with anticipation, his father's expression carrying the particular pride unique to veterans watching their children follow in their footsteps. "Mihijo," his mother began, "we just wanted to wish you luck for your speech tonight. We're so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," Michael replied, feeling a surge of gratitude for their unwavering support throughout his recovery and transition. "I wish you could be here." "We'll be there in spirit," his father assured him. A Vietnam veteran himself, he understood better than most the challenges Michael had faced. "And we've already booked tickets to visit next month for Christmas." They chatted briefly about his preparation for the speech, his parents offering encouragement rather than advice, trusting him to find his own words. Before ending the call, his father added, "Remember, Michael, your story matters not because it's unique, but because it's universal. Every veteran walks a similar path, even if the details differ." The wisdom of that perspective stayed with Michael as he made his way to the Riverbrook Community Center, where the winter dinner was being held. The historic building in the heart of downtown had been transformed for the occasion. Long tables arranged family-style festive decorations, adorning the walls, and a small stage set up at one end of the main hall. As one of the featured speakers, Michael entered through a side door, finding Robert Keller from the Chamber of Commerce, waiting to greet him. "Michael, glad you're here," Keller said, shaking his hand warmly. "We've got a full house tonight. Over 200 people. Your section is near the front, reserved for you and any guests you've invited." "Thank you," Michael replied, momentarily taken aback by the size of the audience. He had expected perhaps 100 attendees, not double that number. Keller seemed to read his thoughts. "Word got around about your speech. Veterans from neighboring towns have come, even some folks from the State Veterans Affairs Office. Your message has resonated beyond Riverbrook." Before Michael could respond, Staff Sergeant Delgado appeared, impeccable in her dress blues. "Corporal Ramirez," she said formally, before breaking into a smile. "You clean up well. The blazer from Rivera fits perfectly." "I should have known. You were in on that," Michael replied with a grin. "Are the others here?" "Full contingent," she confirmed. "Front 2 tables, as requested by Mr. Keller, plus some additional Marines you haven't met yet. Word spread through the base about tonight." The realization that so many had come specifically to hear him speak might have been intimidating weeks ago. Now, Michael felt a sense of responsibility rather than anxiety, a mission to articulate not just his own experience, but the broader challenges and opportunities facing veterans in communities like Riverbrook. As he entered the main hall, the buzz of conversation momentarily dimmed as people noticed his arrival. He saw familiar faces throughout the room. Jimbo Parker and the hardware store staff, Frank and Eleanor Reeves, veterans from the support group, medical staff from the VA hospital, and dozens of community members he had come to know through various interactions over the past months. Near the front, as promised, were 2 tables of Marines in dress blues, his original supporters from the Hartwell's confrontation, plus additional service members from the base. They didn't stand or call attention to his entrance, but each acknowledged him with the subtle nod that carried volumes of meaning between those who had shared the Marine experience. Michael made his way to his assigned seat, greeting people as he went. The atmosphere was warm and festive, the community gathering not just for his speech, but to celebrate their collective identity as Riverbrook prepared for the holiday season. The dinner portion of the evening proceeded with the comfortable rhythm of small-town traditions. Local catering, conversations that flowed easily between tables, children running between adult legs until gently corralled by parents. Michael found himself seated with an eclectic group: Keller from the chamber, the new manager of Hartwell's Market, Ashley and her recently returned brother Marcus, and Frank and Eleanor Reeves. Marcus, still in the lean, alert physical condition of an active-duty Marine, shook Michael's hand with the particular grip that identified him immediately as a fellow member of the Corps. "Honor to meet you, sir," he said, the respect in his voice genuine. "My sisters told me a lot about what happened, about how you handled it." "Your sister showed more courage than I did that day," Michael replied honestly. "Standing up to her boss, risking her job. That takes guts." The conversation around the table flowed naturally, touching on Marcus's deployment, the changes at Hartwell's Market, and the upcoming holiday events in Riverbrook. Michael found himself fully present in the moment, engaged with the people around him in a way that would have seemed impossible just months ago. As the dinner plates were cleared and coffee served, Keller excused himself to take the stage and begin the program. After brief welcoming remarks and acknowledgements of various community contributors, he introduced the evening's first speaker, the Mayor of Riverbrook, who would provide updates on town initiatives before introducing Michael. The mayor's remarks were concise and forward-looking, focusing on how the community had come together over the past year to address challenges ranging from infrastructure needs to support for vulnerable populations. Then, with a warm smile, she turned toward Michael's table. "Our next speaker has become an important voice in our community in a remarkably short time," she began. 3 months ago, many of us didn't know Michael Ramirez. Today, his story and his perspective have helped reshape how Riverbrook thinks about veteran integration and community responsibility. He's a decorated Marine, a combat veteran who sacrificed greatly for our country, and now a thoughtful advocate for building stronger connections between military and civilian life. Please welcome Michael Ramirez. The applause was immediate and genuine. As Michael rose and made his way to the stage, he was struck by the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the isolation of his early months in Riverbrook to standing before the community as a recognized voice, a contributor, a bridge builder. At the podium, he took a moment to survey the room. The faces turned toward him expectantly, the Marines sitting at attention in the front rows, the diverse cross-section of Riverbrook citizens who had gathered to hear what he had to say. He had prepared notes, but as he looked out at the community that had embraced him, he set them aside. This moment called for something more direct, more from the heart. 3 months ago, he began, his voice steady and clear, I was kicked out of a grocery store for being a disabled veteran. Today, I'm standing before you as a member of this community, invited to share thoughts on how we build stronger connections between those who have served and the civilians they return to. That transformation isn't just my story. It's Riverbrook's story. It's a testament to what happens when a community decides to live its values rather than just proclaim them. He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. When I was medically retired from the Marines after losing my leg in combat, I received excellent physical rehabilitation. I learned to walk again, to adapt to my prosthetic, to navigate the practical challenges of my new reality. What no one prepared me for, what I didn't know how to ask for help with, was rebuilding my sense of purpose, my sense of belonging, my sense of identity beyond my service. Michael shifted his weight slightly, a subconscious adjustment, to maintain comfort with his prosthetic during the extended standing. I came to Riverbrook, looking for a quiet place to figure things out on my own. I was existing, not living, going through the motions of civilian life without truly engaging with it. I kept people at a distance, assuming the gap between my experiences and theirs was too wide to bridge. I was wrong. He glanced toward the tables of Marines, drawing strength from their presence. What happened at Hartwell's market that day was painful, being judged, dismissed, and devalued based on my status as a disabled veteran cut deeply. But what followed? The response from my fellow Marines, from store employees like Ashley, from community members who stood up against discrimination. That revealed something profound about Riverbrook and about the possibilities for veteran integration everywhere. Michael's gaze moved to Frank and Eleanor Reeves, who watched with proud, attentive expressions. I've learned that transition isn't something veterans should have to navigate alone. It's a community responsibility, not out of charity or obligation, but because the skills, perspectives, and experiences veterans bring enrich the entire community. When we talk about supporting veterans, we're not just talking about helping them, we're talking about creating pathways for them to continue serving, contributing, and leading in civilian contexts. He outlined the practical steps communities could take: businesses creating veteran hiring initiatives, educational institutions developing programs to translate military experience into academic credit, community organizations intentionally including veteran perspectives in leadership roles, and perhaps most importantly, civilians making the effort to understand the unique challenges of transition without reducing veterans to either heroes or victims. The truth is, Michael continued, most of us who've served don't want special treatment. We want opportunity. We want purpose. We want to continue being part of something larger than ourselves. The challenge isn't just helping veterans adjust to civilian life. It's helping civilian communities recognize and utilize the leadership, adaptability, and service orientation that veterans bring with them. As he spoke, Michael could see heads nodding throughout the room. His words were resonating not as abstract concepts, but as practical insights that connected with people's experiences and values. 3 months ago, a small act of discrimination created ripples throughout this community. Today, those ripples have become waves of positive change. From policy adjustments at businesses to new support programs at the VA, from informal mentor relationships to structured employment pathways. What began as a confrontation has evolved into collaboration, proving that even painful moments can be transformed when a community responds with integrity and purpose. Michael's voice grew stronger as he reached his conclusion. The bridge between military and civilian life isn't built by grand government programs or sweeping national initiatives, though those have their place. It's built person by person, interaction by interaction, opportunity by opportunity, in communities just like Riverbrook. It's built when a hardware store owner sees value in military experience, when elderly veterans reach out to newly discharged ones, when civilians make the effort to understand rather than assume, and when veterans themselves choose engagement over isolation. He looked directly at the Marines in the front rows, his brothers and sisters in service. To my fellow veterans, your mission continues, just in a different uniform. Your training, your experiences, your values are needed here, in communities across America. Your ability to lead, to solve problems, to persist through challenges, these are gifts you bring to civilian life. Don't hide them, don't diminish them, share them. Then he turned his gaze to the broader audience. And to this community, thank you for showing what's possible when we truly see each other, stand up for each other, and create space for each contribution. What you've demonstrated here in Riverbrook isn't just about veteran support. It's about creating a community where everyone's gifts are recognized, where everyone's dignity is upheld, and where everyone has the opportunity to belong and contribute. Michael squared his shoulders, the Marine in him coming to attention naturally as he delivered his final thought. The strongest communities are those where every member, regardless of background, regardless of ability, regardless of circumstance, has both the opportunity to serve and the support to thrive. In Riverbrook I found both. For that I am profoundly grateful, and because of that I am fully committed to continuing this work of building bridges, together with all of you. As Michael stepped back from the podium, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet spontaneously, the standing ovation spreading from the Marines in the front row throughout the entire hall. The response wasn't just polite recognition. It was wholehearted affirmation of the vision he had articulated, the possibilities he had illuminated. In that moment, as he looked out at the community that had become his home, Michael Ramirez felt the final pieces of his transition click into place. The journey wasn't over. Transition was an ongoing process, not a destination reached. But the foundation was secure, the path forward clear. He was no longer defined primarily by what he had lost, but by what he continued to give. No longer identified solely by his past service, but by his present purpose. No longer separated from civilian life by invisible barriers, but integrated into a community that valued both his military experience and his human complexity. As he returned to his seat, receiving handshakes and words of appreciation along the way, Michael caught sight of Staff Sergeant Delgado. She didn't speak, but her expression conveyed a simple, powerful message. Mission accomplished. And indeed it was, though not the mission he had anticipated when he first arrived in Riverbrook. He had come seeking peace and healing for himself. He was staying to help create those possibilities for others. The mission had evolved, expanded, transcended personal recovery to embrace community transformation. In that evolution lay the true power of the story that had begun with rejection at a grocery store and culminated in this moment of collective affirmation. The understanding that our individual journeys gain their deepest meaning when they contribute to something larger than ourselves. For Michael Ramirez, former Marine, disabled veteran and now community bridge builder, that understanding wasn't just comforting, it was the foundation of a purposeful future, built one relationship, one opportunity, one act of service at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.